This is the first time I'm meeting you. I'll be meeting you for 4 sessions. Tomorrow one, and the following Monday and Tuesday, that is 13th and 14th of March. Also, I'll be meeting you on screen. I have been assigned the responsibility of interacting with you and also discussing with you certain aspects of creative writing. And one among those aspects, or one among different genres of literature, is poetry. How to write poetry? What do we mean by writing poetry? Well, I want to familiarize you, not that you don't know. You might have heard of, please, admit. Like the Nigerian poet, Wole Soyinka, Nobel laureate. Welcome, Mayor. Mr. Mayor, welcome to the session.
Thank you so much, Professor. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm sure.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for being late.
I'm sure you're also
Yeah.
doing great or doing well. Well,
Uh,
I'm happy that Dombo is there. Mr. Mohammed is there. Mr. Mayor is there. I'm sure some more will join us maybe in due course, maybe tomorrow or in the days to come. Well, having said that, literature, as you know, there are different genres of literature. Two main genres, major principal genres: prose and poetry. Under prose, we have essays, letters, short stories, right? Um, well, autobiographical notes. Under prose, fiction, very important, or novel, we call it novel. Fiction is a modern term. Then we have another classification, another major principal genre of literature is poetry. Under poetry, we have poems, epics, religious epics like the Holy Bible is poetry. The Holy Quran is also poetry. They'll be in the verse form. I'd love to give the spelling also. Verse, verse form, poetic form. And drama or plays. Yeah. Plays will also be in the poetic form. Most of the plays in British literature, even in American literature, African literature, some of them or most of them are in the poetic form. So under major genre poetry, we have plays, we have poems, and many such things. Now, how does a, a prose passage or a prose writing differ from a, a poem or a poetic writing? I was about to tell you, in the African continent also, we have very well-known poets, particularly from Nigeria. One of the most very well-known dramatists or playwright, literary critic, essayist, and a poet is Sir Wole Soyinka. Wole Soyinka, a Nobel laureate. Similar, he has also written some fiction, some novels, two important novels, very well-known novels. He has authored. Number one, The Interpreters, and number two, Season of Anomy. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Audible. Please, if I'm not audible, put up your hand and let me know so that I can repeat if you want. I don't mind.
All those.
Please.
We
Okay.
can hear you. We can
Please,
hear you.
please, if you're not able to follow me, if I'm not audible, let me know. I'll repeat.
Yeah, sir, please, are you using the PPT right?
No, I'm going to. Before that, I'm giving an introduction.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. We are following, sir.
I went to come to the PPT.
Yeah. Okay,
Slide.
okay. So
Right.
by my side, I had an internet failure. That's why I locked off.
I'm going a little out of the slides also.
Okay, no problem, sir. Keep on.
Then only a brief introduction to the entire course on writing poetry. And poets, for a long time, since the dawn of civilization, they have been writing poetry modeled on the European or English models, later American models. You know that there's only one English. Now there are many Englishes. Don't think I'm going out of that. I want you to know that the language of poetry can be the language of the writer. That's why I'm saying this. A poem written by an African writer will have the language of the Africans, perhaps Nigerians, maybe some other parts of African continent. A poem written by an American will have the American slang, may have slang expressions, may have the American usage of words, may have American symbols, etc. And a poem written by a non-European or non-British. For example, an Indian poet may be using Indian expressions in his poetry. That's why I'm giving you this one. This is not in your books. I'm going little out of that. Kindly bear with me. I'm not here only to tell you what is there in the book. I must tell you something in addition to what has been given in your books. Okay, that is why I'm saying all this. In another 2 or 3 minutes, I'll come back to. I'll come to the slides and the PowerPoints presented there, which you'll be able to see on the screen.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, we are appreciating it.
Yeah. I'm. Don't think I'm start. Don't expect me to start right from what is poetry, etc. But this whole course is highly there for you to enable yourself to write poetry and become, maybe in future, maybe in the days to come, very well-known writers of poetry or composers of poetry, composers of poems. Right? I was telling you, how is a prose piece different from a poetic piece or a poem? Only in language use. That's all, nothing more than that. Only in the language use, in the tone. I'll take you to that slide when we are talking about kinds of poetry and things like that. So with this brief introduction, I welcome you all to this course, taught course on writing poetry, a part of the Diploma in Creative Writing in English, offered by the Indira Gandhi National Open University or the portal Vidyabharti. I welcome you on behalf of IGNOU and also on my personal behalf to this course. We'll be meeting for 4 days. The first day being today, the 6th of March 2023. Right? Today, we are going to discuss more about the contents in Book 1. Book 1 is about themes. Book 1 in DCE Writing Poetry is dealing with the aspect of themes in poetry. The word theme, in simple words, in simple terms, ordinary layman's definition, not the definition, ordinary common man's definition, right? The word theme refers to the content, the subject, the central idea, what that poem is about, or what that piece of writing is about. Any piece of writing, even if you're going to write a letter, the subject, the word theme refers to the subject, the central idea, the central, I can call it, central idea. The idea may be argumentative, the idea may be contested, the idea may be someone's personal experience. What's the personal experience? The idea may be something about nature. The idea may be something about natural calamities or disasters. Anything. By the word theme, we refer to only the central idea. I won't call it the thought content, it's the content. Flowing word or 50 lines, 20 lines, okay? The thoughts flowing over, or flowing through, I can use the word through also, flowing through, somewhere near 20 lines, 10 lines, 14 lines, even 5 lines. Poetry can be a rhyme also. Very well-known rhymes like, I know in the African schools and college, in schools, you might have that this it's all centered on English context. Okay, Baba Black Sheep, heavy any wool, like that. And over a period of time, you being in a continent which was again which uses some kind of what we call 3 or 4 pidgin varieties of English, right? In Nigeria, 3 or 4 pidgin varieties. A very well-known poet or writer like Vietong, Ingo Vietong, Tongo, Othong.
Nguchi Wachongo.
Yeah. I'm sorry, my African name pronunciation.
Yeah,
Don't mistake
yeah,
me. It's not.
yeah.
Please, no.
The Kenyan writer Nguchi Wachongo.
Kindly bear with me. He
Yeah.
was saying that decolonization of the mind is more important. Well, that's a different thing. And he has written some poems, some essays. Chinua Achebe, very important novelist, very well-known novelist. Dance of the Forest. Chinua Achebe, well, many novels he has written. he uses the African slang expressions, the African pidgin variety. Some West African people use the creolized variety of language. So when you write poetry, you may have to use the variety of English with which you are familiar. I cannot expect you to write the English of the English. You get my point? Creative writing is something which is highly original, wherein the writer, who is going to be called a poet later, okay, after a series of writings accepted, etc., etc., you may be using your own language expressions, your own tribal varieties of language. Every language has a tribal variety also. Every language has what we call the so-called elite variety, which is be done only by the royal fellows and the so-called people belonging to the higher echelons of life, higher status society, etc. They also sometimes, depending on the context, they may be also using the language of the commoner. They may be creative. If their creative work has to be accepted, that work must appeal, in the language form I'm trying to say, must appeal to the reader. So, when a tribal writes, I'm not understanding, he or she may be including the tribal dialectal variety. Class dialects, we call it in English, class dialects. Work dialects, workplace dialects, regional dialects, right? Tribal dialects. A dialect is a variety of the same language, a subclass or sub-variety of that language. In the workplace, we may be using some dialects, which we may not be using in our homes or in the marketplace. Whether you write a short story or a poem, you are going to use the language of your own place, the language of your environment. Let me make it very clear on the very first day. Right? But at the same time, you cannot go or violate to a large violate in an extremely different way the norms of writing, basic norms of writing. Diction, you can use anything, but basic norms of writing. This also will be discussing in the days to come when we talk about writing poetry. On the very first day, my first slide on the screen, you'll be able to see is the possible definitions. How a poem can be defined. Poetry is a body of poems, a collection. A poem is an individual work or individual piece. I don't want to say work, individual piece in that body of poetry. Many people have defined poetry in many different ways. I personally feel these three definitions or four definitions which I have given there. Best words in best order. What is best to you need not be best to me. Unless otherwise we are talking about or we are going to look at the what we call the right. There's nothing called the right or nothing called the wrong. Right? Best words. That's what I'm again and again trying to tell you. Best words need not, best words used by an African poet need not be the best words to an Indian reader or an African reader, because my dialectal varieties of English, my pidgin varieties, my creolized forms will definitely find a place in my art of writing, whether I write a prose piece or a poem. But at the same time, those best words that appeal to you, that is, or those words that are in your own environment, in your own context, must be in a good order. Best words in best order. This is the definition given by a British writer in those days. Right? Then, what is poetry? It's an act. It's a process. It is an activity where or in which the writer, the poet, right, writes something which is a result of his or her own imagination. I imagine like flying in space. You can use the word, you may ask the question, sir, can you fly in space? Moving in space, but flying in air. Look at the word. Moving in space, flying in air. Are you able to get the difference? I'm just using it intentionally. And I just imagine that I'm flying, I am moving in space, maybe in a satellite or on a rocket or any mode of transport in space. I imagine. Then I imagine, whoa, when I move in space, the outer space, how life is going to be. How will I feel? What kind of experiences I may have? Or what are those things I may miss? So I imagine. When I imagine that I'm going to teach African students, it's all examples only, please don't mistake me. I imagine, well, African students must be more creative, must be more intelligent, and must be more receptive, must be more interactive, etc., etc. I imagine that then start, okay, I'm going to write something. I'm going to tell them something. The content. That content may be real. What I'm going to express or what I express might have become real. I might have imagined about the past and the past in the past. I might have imagined. Or I might be imagining something which is going to take place maybe in a day or two or in a century or two. So poetry is an expression of imagination. The third definition which I have given there is, again, it's not my original. Some poets have said that. A poet like William Wordsworth, a British poet, an English poet, okay, he has defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. All these three words are very important. Spontaneous. I'm not just looking for words. I'm not looking for phrases here and there. I'm not waiting for thought. It has to be spontaneous. I'm not looking for an agent to force me. Spontaneous. I observe you sitting on your desk. And then I immediately go home. Oh, yes. I saw Mr. X sitting with his head bent or with his head low, and then writing something. And I start writing. Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Every piece of writing is an expression of feeling. Feeling. Feeling in terms of my appreciation, my understanding, my comprehension, my emotion, my oneness with that, my yearning to be a part of that incident, yearning, Y-E-A-R-N-I-N-G spelling, my longing, maybe my sense of belonging. All these will be reflected, okay, in my writing. It's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tract, recollected. So the word recollection means poetry is that kind of writing which says something about your experience or your experiencing of the past. Recollect, simple past word there, recollected. I cannot be observing a clock here and then writing poetry. That's what that poet is saying. Oh, I see a clock here. The clock is going to strike 6 p.m. IST, Indian Standard Time. It's going to be 10 minutes to 6 p.m. I cannot be writing that. And that is not poetry. I see the clock ticking now, and then when I go back home, maybe I have my own space, and then I just recollect means recall what all happened between 5:05 and maybe 7:05 this evening, according to Indian Standard Time, 17 hours, between 17 hours and 19 hours. Okay, I go. I find my own space, I find my own place, and then I think of, okay, this is how I introduced myself. This is what I did. This is what Mr. Aga was telling. This is what Mr. Dumbu was saying. This is what Ms. Muhammad was saying. I simply write something. Okay, they were very good. They were very nice. Nice they were. Nice they were. I'm not going to say they were nice. They were nice is prose. Nice they were, and highly warm. And warm too. Where? Look at the lines that I imagine. Nice they were, and warm too, where I found my belongingness. Are you able to follow the lines?
Yes, sir.
You get my point, how my emotions are expressed. I can write it in the prose form. Oh, I talked to them. I talked to those 3 or 4 scholars there. They were very nice. They were warm, and they greeted me. All this is normal. If I have to write it in the poetic form, I'm going to change the order. Okay. So, this is how it goes. The poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. Small mistakes here and there on the screen, recollected, or must be small caps. Okay, don't worry. A poetry or a poem is a combination of activities of reason and imagination. It is not just imagination, it is something which results as a result of thinking. It is not just an activity which is born out of imagination. It also includes reasoning, means thoughts, thinking. So thinking about the past, maybe imagining about the past, thinking and imagine combination, an amalgamation of thought and imagination is poetry. Combination means amalgamation, putting together. It is not just imagination. So I think, example, I think, I reason out, and then I add some more color to my thoughts. I add some more ornaments to my thoughts. That ornaments may be because of my imagination. For example, a parrot. I don't know how many of you are familiar with these kind of birds, because I'm told in the United States elephants are very rare. So I don't know in the African continent whether you have such birds. Okay, only we'll have to talk about bird migration. Okay, yeah. For example, a parrot. I see a parrot flying over me. See I a parrot. See I a parrot. Okay, parroting around, singing. See I a parrot hovering about. I can use the word hover, flying, moving. So one word, flying above me, hovering means moving, and flying and moving. I just think about what will it be like a parrot flying? Where is it flying? How does it fly? Then I imagine certain other things about the body of the parrot. Because I just think about it. I say something about, well, what happens if the parrot which I see flying there comes and talks to me? A parrot may also greet me. A parrot may not be greeting me. A parrot may be not the real parrot in my lines. It may be representing some other concept, some other idea. So I think, imagine, and then write some lines. So I repeat, poetry or a poem is best words in best order. It's an expression of imagination. Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. Poetry involves, it's a combination, or poetry includes a combination, writing poetry. Therefore, poetry is a combination of activities of reason and imagination. Why I say all this is, when you start writing poetry, you can. Don't worry about the grammar. Don't worry about the what we call the use of words. To begin with, over a period of time, all of you will become very good, very well-known poets, accepted poets. This is my hope on your behalf. But you should start writing. And poetry cannot be written as you see things. It is just not like running commentary, right? I see the calendar, here the calendar showing me the dates and time. Perhaps about today, about this class between 5 and 7, when I go back home, it will have become a past, and I will be in a position to recollect then I can write some lines. Those lines to begin with may not be highly appropriate, but it will be appropriate. You may be looking for some words, and as and when you start writing, whether you write a prose piece or that, you will be going on revising through reading it again and again and again. I have this your project also in mind. That is why I'm saying this. You may be asking, sir, why this much? So I want you to start writing. And when I write poetry, the ways in which I'm going to express my emotions, a very important point. Some poets like the African American poets, many African American poets are there, right? Where they have been expressing in their own poetry the ways in which they have been marginalized, the ways in which people of both sexes, right, men and women, the ways in which they have been accepted, the ways in which they find themselves comfortable in an alien, not so alien now, in an alien environment. So I write, for example, a poem, I rise and rise and rise. Very important, very like. At the end of these sections, I'll give you some very well known African American poets, African poets. You can go through their works, and you can also become a poet. That's my wish, and that's my prayer too. Okay. The next slide. And then it is going to language of poetry. I'm just it is deviant in order and structure. Language of poetry uses, or poets use what we call poetic devices. And the language of poetry, language here means you are using English, but structure is different. Ordering is different. Only one example. I saw Mr. Muhammad. One example. Poets will say, saw I Muhammad. Saw I Muhammad. Listen to change in the order. Saw I. One good example. Next session, I'll be giving examples from only African poets. Today, some British poets, very well-known British poets of the past, of the yesteryears, like Wordsworth. In your books also give some poets written by, some poems written by poets from Britain. Okay, I'll try to get some books. Maybe next Monday or Tuesday, I'll give you some examples from examples of poems written by African writers. Because I have to be very, very personalized, very personal. I can be, yeah. Okay. So, deviant in order and structure, use of poetic devices, and the language of poetry is different from the language of prose in ordering and structure, and the use of devices. Okay. What are these devices? Well, maybe in the next session we can discuss. Now, what is there in a poem? A poem is the voice of a speaker in the written form, that's all. In script, what I feel, what I want to speak, I write, that's all. Poetry is invariably in the written mode, invariably. Only after writing, I go on recite a poem, read a poem, read or recite. First comes writing. When I write, any writing exercise, any writing activity is only speaking in the print form. Take it from me. Any writing activity, whether you write a prose piece or a poem, right? You are writing what you are speaking. You are writing or you are speaking in print. That's all. It's a writing activity. When I speak, I am giving my voice. When I speak, I am articulating my thoughts. When I speak, I am actually expressing orally what I feel, what I want to share, what I want to suggest, what I want to actually, mm, how I want to react or respond to something. Let me make it clear to you, gentlemen, no activity can happen in vacuum. Every activity is a response to a stimulus. All these things are there in your book. I'm still telling you, any activity, you cannot act in vacuum. You cannot act without a trigger before you, a stimulus before you. The stimulus might have been your past experience. The stimulus might have been given from an outside agency. The stimulus may be from within. Very important point. Are you able to follow me? Sirs?
Yes, sir.
Please, please, please. So, no activity, no human activity is without a stimulus. Poetry is also a response to a stimulus. A stimulus. And the stimulus, when a poet responds to a stimulus or stimuli, plural, singular, plural. He or she, a women poet is also there, we can say he or she. There is no such word. There was a word called poetess. Now, in 2023, we call a male a male poet also is poet, a women poet also poet. Not necessarily poetess, author, authoress, poet, poetess. No, not necessary. Poet is a common gender, neutral gender word. It can be he or it can be a she. Okay. But when I speak, when I write, sometimes I include some other voices also. I am not responding to a stimulus just as an individual, just as the only individual. I may be bringing in a few more voices and then writing. But I am writing. I am writing on behalf of other imagined voices. Sometimes, or what we call other characters. Okay? Who we call other characters. Not what, who we call other characters. So the speaking voice can be one, the poet himself or herself. The speaking voices can be many in the same poem. But the author of that poem will be one, but many other voices, it will appear as if many other voices are also speaking. So when I read a poem, I can find out whether it is only one person's voice running throughout or there is some other voice coming in between. Okay. If it is one voice, it can be the poet himself or herself. Voice and again, non-verbal voices, which are expressed through print. Voice are persons, or your book says personae, P-E-R-S-O-N-A-E. Your book uses the word personae, plural. Voices or persons can be through images and symbols. Symbols. A symbol is a symbol can convey an idea. For example, a symbol like a rose A symbol like rose can convey many ideas. A symbol like lily can idea. An animal symbol can convey many meanings, many ideas. I use a symbol there, that's all. Like summer tempest came her tears. Like summer tempest came her tears. This is the line from a poem titled Home They Brought Her Warrior Dead. Tempest is used as a symbol, summer tempest. The tears were so ferocious, so wild, the tears were so rough, so hard. Like summer tempest came her tears. Okay. This is one line from a poem titled, the poem titled Home They Brought Her Warrior Dead. Summer tempest. Tempest is shown as a symbol. Used as a symbol. Well, the speaking voice can be fictional, historic, or dramatic. The personal experiences get depersonalized through the different forms, like fictional form, historic forms, or dramatic. As with the fictional form, as with the different form, my language changes, my language order changes, my structure order changes, everything changes. If it is going to be only a narrative, a story like a conversational poem, for example, Abu Ben Adam, a conversational poem. Sometimes the conversation can be between the poet and his self, self. It can be fictional or historic or dramatic. When the poet writes, it gets depersonalized. And that's what your note says. Then the next slide. Kinds of poetry. Ballad, ode, epic, lyric, elegy. A ballad is a sturdy poem. An ode is a poem which glorifies something animate with something inanimate also. Ode to clothes, that is a poem. I don't remember the poet, sorry. Kindly bear with me. Ode to clothes. That is going on praising the clothes worn by human beings. Words are always in praise of something. For example, some of the romantic poets are ode to a Grecian urn, ode on a Grecian urn, urn, ode to skylark, melancholy, ode to nightingale, ode to nightingale. It will be always in praise of those animate and inanimate. Ode to a bird, any bird. Ode to maybe some object. So animated, it will be always in praise of odes are always, most of the times, odes are in praise of some subject. Can be animate, can be inanimate. I look at it. As I told you, ode to clothes. What happens to clothes? How good are clothes? How useful are clothes? What happens if clothes are not there? So that's a ode is also a kind of poem wherein the subject will be in praise of some subject. Many such words are there in English. Perhaps African writers also might have written words. You have to. There is a good book on poetry in Africa, and I hope you will definitely agree with me. Most of the poems in African poetry deal with what we call, you shouldn't mistake me, what we call the hard days that you and I had. That's a good poem by Ule Suenka. It's not a word. Telephone conversation. Nigerian poet Ule Suenka just writes about every day happening. Telephone conversation. I think you must be able to locate this poem even on the YouTube or any other book online. It's a very good poem. Using African expressions, I should say Nigerian expressions and Nigerian words, dialects, etc. And the whole poem is about what happens when someone rents out the house and how he or she describes herself, how he or she projects herself as an African throughout, in total. The next kind of poetry is epic. Epics are usually long poems, usually. They are of high length. A word can be just 20 lines or 30 lines, even maximum 30 lines. A ballad can be some 40 to 50 lines. But epics run for lines and lines. Milton's Paradise Lost. And again, Ulysses Yanka. An epic like poetry here. Then lyrics. Lyrics are again a kind of poetry or a kind of poem, even, or kinds of poems. Lyrics are also kinds of poems where there is some kind of inbuilt meter, rhythm, and they can be tuned to a lyre, Lyre. That's why they are called lyrics. Whether it is a ballad, let me make it very clear, whether it is a ballad or an ode or an epic or a lyric or the next one, elegy, there's always a subject. And that subject which is dealt with or which has been described or which has been expressed will invariably be out of the personal experiences, imagined or personal experiences actually met with by the writer, namely the poet. The next one is elegy. An elegy is again a poem wherein it is just like I write an elegy only on people who are no more, on dead people. Right? Many that's happened. I write a poem. An elegy will be invariably dealing with grief, sorrow, and pain. Very well-known elegies are lines written in country churchyard or Lycidas by very well-known poets. Elegy is a kind of poem, a type of poem which has the subject like a obituary, condoling the death of somebody. When I condole the death of somebody or some society, something like that, it will be invariably expressing my sorrow. And it will have some kind of autobiographical elements as well. In a lyric, there need not be, but in an elegy, there'll be a lot of, there'll be at least a few autobiographical elements. But the content will be more or less on the individual or something which is no more, which is not alive, which is dead. An elegy is a form of poetry which conveys someone's grief, someone's sorrow, someone's pain. Okay. Then types of poetry. Narrative, that is story. Dramatic, as if a conversational, okay, the sense, something as if it is happening. And lyrical again, you know that. As a mood in a poem, in mood, the poem can be reflective or narrative or argumentative or conversational or in the dialogue form. Two people just arguing about an issue, a problem. Right? That can be written in the poetic form. Again and again, I'm telling you, a prose piece can be I don't want to use translated, can be changed into can be changed into poetic form also. One good example, a poem by William Wordsworth, a romantic poet, Daffodils, Daffodils, Daffodils. Both the poet and his relative, Dorothy Wordsworth, they were walking along a field of daffodils are kind of flowers. Okay. Maybe those flowers were there or there in England, okay, in the Lake District. Perhaps in India, I can't find a daffodil. Near equivalent of daffodil I can find, but we call it in a different way. That's what I'm saying. The context around which, the environment around which. You may not, I don't know about the African environment. I don't know whether you have seen daffodils, but you can imagine how a daffodil, by drawing parallels or by drawing some kind of similarity in appearance, in color, in the shape or the design or the pattern of its petals. A flower will have its petals. A flower will have a design on the petals. A flower will have a long stalk. Some flowers may be water-growing plants, giving flowers. Plants giving flowers, like the lotus. Lotus. Well, when I'm writing, so I can be always make my writing as if I reflect what I had seen, reflect. And that can be in a narrative form, just a descriptive form, maybe a story, argumentative, conversational tone. In mood and tone, I can also use the word tone there, or in the dialogue form. That's all about kinds of. Any question from you up to this?
No, sir. No, sir.
Any question? Any question you want to ask, or any doubt?
No, sir. No doubt.
No, sir, no question.
Feel free. Just don't think I'm going to be upset if you ask a question. I want the class to be highly interactive. It should not be just one lecturer going on saying something.
Yeah, we are following, sir. We are following.
Thank you very much. If you got any doubts, please ask. I'm trying to give some examples from the known poems. And I'd be happy if you could lay your hands on one of the African poets' writings. Perhaps overnight you'll be able to search and look for.
For elegy, I don't know about African, but I know for French writer, Victor Hugo's.
Please. That's French writer. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, Victor Hugo's.
Yeah. One minute. You can just look tomorrow when you come to the class, you can just put it. You also can put it on the screen so that I can read and then we can discuss. And please remember, any poet writes only in his own environment. Maybe imagined environment or in a diasporic environment. And the theme of the subject will be invariably in relation to the context in which it is written. That is all. Very important. You should bear in mind if you are in poetry. For example, don't think I'm giving examples only of COVID-19. All of you know what it is. The human disaster, natural disaster, the epidemic, okay, the pandemic situation. Millions and millions died across the globe, across the world. Well, now, by God's grace, it has COVID-19 is not showing his ugly face. Let's pray. As a believer, I'm using these words. But if you recollect, only your words will be of your words will convey a different mood, a different tone, a different feeling. On the other hand, if you are going to write a few lines of poetry on this class, you just see how it is going to be. You can just see. Please remember, no poem, no poetry has to be fully what we call accurate and appropriate. There will be in any poetry some kind of exaggeration of facts. Exaggeration of facts, not lies. Exaggeration. How do we exaggerate certain things? Only by using that kind of word or what we call diction, Diction, to show that I'm actually projecting the bad in a very high way, in a very enormous, projecting the good also, very highly, or what do you call hyping, HYPING, giving a hype, to both good and bad by choosing those words which exaggerate. Even exaggeration, say, supposing I score 80 marks in, supposing. My teacher, oh, he has done very well. Nobody like this gentleman. He has got only 80, not 100 or 100. But the teacher or his fellow, oh, he was a golden medalist, something like that. No one was any exaggeration of the fact. Might be fact, but saying it. There was loads of things. No one else could have got that. There might have been one or two near him, but exaggeration. Well, exaggeration is accepted in writing poetry, not in prose. Not in prose. Which is in prose, unless otherwise it's going to be fictional, if it is going to be descriptive, I don't think there's place for exaggeration there. I don't think. I may be wrong. We'll discuss tomorrow. Forget about that. Okay. And elements of poetry. Next. Voice. What constitutes? What are those elements that make up, that are included in poet. Voice. The speaking voice. The author himself, the poet himself or herself. There is a voice. That may be the voice of the poet. That may be the voice of not the poet, but someone else. Okay? It can be a fiction. A fiction is not a fact. Fiction, fictitious character, we say, highly well. But even in the fiction, when you read the fiction, you can find the same types in the normal, in our own environment. One example, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, or E.M. Foster's A Passage to India. It's all fiction. Those characters, even now we can find those characters in our real life. Fiction may be imagined, may be unreal, but then we can find the truth of the content in day-to-day life as well. Any kind of writing, whether it's poetry writing or prose writing, drama writing or short story writing, all writers, all creative writers, they do imagine. Well, I can write on the real character also. If I'm going to write something about African cricket, I have to write something about the cricketers, real cricketers, and their performance, right? You can write. I'm giving you clues. Don't name, because we have to be careful. On a cricketer whom you love, you can write, or whom you like, or a very well-known cricketer who you have lost, South Africa, or Australia, or Caribbean team, West Indies. I mean, okay, West Indies or Caribbean team or Indian team, who you might have seen playing or bowling, etc., etc. You can write a poem on him. So, need not be fiction. May be real characters also, but in fiction, most of the times, the characters are imagined, but they have something real about them. Right? Then, another element of poetry is the different use of different figures of speech. Figures of speech are nothing but poetic devices, poetic expressions of something like that, which include, only for example, I'm going to leave one or two, the rest we will discuss maybe in Unit 4. Simile, metaphor, very common, very well known use of well-known figures of speech. Simile, metaphor, oxymoron, irony, okay, many such things. Then imagery. Every poem may be using some kind of an image to convey a point. Image is different from a symbol. A symbol very clearly expresses what it stands for. An image only reflects. Image in your mirror. The image in your mirror reflects your life. Imagery is reflecting an idea through some words, whereas symbols, they stand for some ideas, not representing. They stand for, they mean, as I told you. And I would request all of you to try writing something about, I'm going to give a title, even without knowing, imagine that you have not read all these books. You want to write something about some idea, some person. I would request you to try your hands in writing 4 or 5 lines about the idea called mother. M-O-T-H-E-R. I don't want, I'm sorry, I have to use the word idea. That it's a concept. Supreme concept all over the world is mother. M-O-T-H-E-R. Okay. I can't be going on saying more about that. It is for you. Then another element of poetry is rhythm. Rhythm, the ways in which words are not arranged, words are used. Okay. And I must be saying every word has, there may be monosyllabic words, there may be disyllabic words. Then I must take you to what you syllable. A syllable is a sound unit in a word. Rhythmic words, every some kind of a meter, some kind of well set tone. Rhythm. Then the last one is structure. Every poem has a structure. Structure in terms of ordering the lines. Structure in terms of arranging these lines in a poem. Structure is the use of structuring the figures of speech that you use, all that kind of thing. Okay? The next one is the actual, right? What can be the themes on which you can write a poem? What theme I said, theme refers to the subject, the content, the central idea, the content. What is that you are going to write about? Do you want to write in praise of a bird? Or do you want to write something about the ecology? Ecology, E-C-O-L-O-G-Y, ecology prevailing in your own environment. Ecology can be what we call the atmosphere. A-T-M-O-S-P-H-E-R-E, the atmosphere. Okay. It can be personal. Theme can be personal. Theme can be something to do with the society. You want to write something about a problem that worries, okay, the entire society, the African continent, and the African villages, and the African cities, the African what we call the tribal sector, and African schools and colleges, the kind of atmosphere prevailing. It may be about the problems faced by the two different or the different sections of the society. Picking on one society and then trying to sell. Okay. Another possible theme can be, now how is a social theme different from a public theme? Second one is what we call public theme. A public theme, social theme is related to a particular society. Public is throughout. It may have a universal appeal. It may have a universal relevance. Social theme may be specific to your society, to your own environment. I said ecology. Public, that particular theme or the subject which the subject that you are going to write on may be universally relevant. It may have a universal appeal. Whereas when you write in your own theme on in your environment, perhaps a reader like me or an audience like me will have to find the parallels. Okay, whether this exists, whether that society, what happens in that society, can it fit? There are some what we call universal themes. Themes which are common to the whole universe. Human relations, for example. Discriminations, another example. Problems between the rich and the poor. Okay? It's all, the whole world is. The suffering and the non-suffering. It has. Sufferings can be many. So public themes are different from social themes. Social themes, society, perhaps very specific. Public, all those themes which will have a universal appeal and which will apply to almost the entire human society all over the world. Some fictional writers of fiction, have been dealing with public themes. For example, I'll give you examples from poetry and also drama, okay, or novel. People living in exile. People living in exile, migrated from India as a writer. I got migrated to, let's say, Australia or the United States or someplace in South Africa, Johannesburg or something like that. Some place like that. All migrated individuals will have some kind of a common problem. They may be accepted, they may not be accepted, they may not have a sense of belongingness, they may have sense of belongingness, and within that society, men and women differences, how women are treated among and by the same migrated society and by the outside society. These are all public things. Don't worry about it. Okay. So public themes. Public themes will be universal relevance. Many examples here. The themes we have may be talking about moral values. T.S. Eliot, a very, very well-known 20th century poet, dramatist, essayist, literary critic, a Puritan. He was always dealing with the moral ideas, morality. The subject will be, the central idea will be driving home the point of the need for some kind of moral conviction, morality to prevail. And themes can be philosophical. When you go for epics, in good epics, there'll be always, when I say good, there's nothing called bad. In all religious scriptures, philosophy is behind them. The theme of any, in my view, I'm not generalizing, I don't think I'm wrong, but I'm trying to say, most of the epics, most of the religious scriptures are not only telling us the story, are not only giving us the poetic lines, there are statements which help us to find or understand the philosophy of life. For example, one example, Ulysses by Lord Tennyson, a very good poem, well-known poem, Ulysses, Ulysses. Okay, Ulysses, the poem Ulysses. There's one line. There's only one line. Okay, drink life to the lees. It's highly philosophical. Shakespeare has come out with lots of philosophical statements. Life is a tale told by an idiot, philosophy. The whole world is surrounded with sleep, again philosophy, death. So there are many philosophical themes contained in. Do your duty, leave the rest to the Almighty, is a philosophy. Arey, that fellow is too young, but he is that. Philosophers say, well, that is that destiny has invited, that's divine calling. We can't help it. Right? Some kind of sayings. So the possible themes in any poem can be something to do with helping the society to come to terms with, not only to come to terms with, and also to get to become aware of. To become awareness creation is also a function of a poet. A theme which has not been known to them, a problem which has not been known to them, a poet can always write it in his poem and then make the people. So the function of poetry is not just writing about something about on my imagination and things. The function of poet may be awareness creating. Something about helping the person or people to accept reality or understand reality, not only accept. Accepting reality comes in the philosophical thing. And all these can be one in many or many in one. Don't think a social theme poem should not include a moral focus, not necessary. It can. A social poem, a social theme should not include a statement which is highly philosophical in concept, in meaning, and in thought. It can have some relevance to the whole world. But all these can be in one. All these can be only in isolation also. A good poem, there's nothing called bad poem. A good poem may have a social theme inbuilt, may have a public theme conveyed, and may have a moral lesson taught, and it may be talking something about a philosophical issue. Am I clear? Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All these four themes can be in one. A poem can be focusing on only one of these themes. There's nothing wrong. Just one theme.
Yes, like Paradise Lost by like in Paradise Lost we can find all those four teams.
Milton, you are right. All in one. Can be. Don't think a poem should have only be talking about only a social theme or only about moral values. Not necessary. It may include all the four. Sometimes themes can be about nature, about the landscape, just like that. You visit your garden every evening, and tomorrow morning you sit and start writing something about your gardens. You will come out with beautiful lines of poetry. You have not tried. That's not a complaint. That's my observation. You try. The lines that you get will sound poetic, sir. Right. Okay? Maybe. Why is it that we are not able to? We means it includes me. Me too. I'm not a poet. I'm not a creative writer either. But why is it? We always wait for time. Wait. Tomorrow I'll write. No. Start writing. Because you are going to earn your diploma in creative writing. Start writing. You should feel that you deserve that diploma. Start writing. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about structuring. Don't worry about spelling. You write. That should be a theme. It can be about your own home, something personal. So poems can be personal, poems can be reflective, poems can be an argument about an issue, poems can be a dialogue. And imagine the participant is there before you, a dramatic dialogue in the form of a drama. You are asking some question, or you are creating an issue, and some imagined audience or some imagined speaking voice. Okay, speaking voice. You are trying to respond to that, and please don't forget, no writing is possible. I want to underline this, without a stimulus. Every poem, every piece of writing to me is a response to a stimulus which you may have, or you may face, or you may have experienced. As say, if I go to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, if I'm right, it may be appealing to me in a different way. It may be appealing to you in a different way. For some people, Eiffel Tower may not be appealing at all, but Eiffel Tower is there. Similarly, there may be some landscapes, some places, some what you call it. If you go to Egypt, we are talking about pyramids. They may be appealing. And behind every pyramid, there is a philosophy. Behind every pyramid, there is a history. Behind every pyramid, there is a life. Behind every pyramid, perhaps there is some kind of a moral lesson about the individual. It can be social, it can be public. Right? All of you must have seen that film, The Titanic. Well, lots of symbols, lots of social issues. It's all in the dialogue form. A film is in the dialogue form. A poem can also be in the dialogue form. A poem can be also in the reflective form. A poem can be autobiographical. A poem can be an elegy. A poem can be a story in the story narrative form. Okay, ballad. So a poem can be an ode, as we were. A poem can be an expression of sorrow, as in an elegy. Okay, so possible themes can be either social or public, or themes can be with a moral focus, and themes can be philosophical. And oh God, how do I? And themes continued. Romantic themes. The word romantic has different shades of meaning. The word romantic has different shades, different levels of meaning, different kinds of meaning. But most of us have been using that word romantic to mean something to express love between a boy and a girl, or the mother and not mother, of course, between two opposite genders. Normally, romantic. He is highly romantic, means he is experiencing some kind of pleasure, imagined. And romanticism, romantic themes need not be realistic, but still they are a theme. Very important point. Romantic themes, whereas social themes can be real, public themes can be real, themes which have a moral focus.
Sir, please, there is a message on the message box.
Sorry?
There is a message in message box. Could you please read it?
Several shades of meaning.
Oh, okay. Like Mohammed Mustafa asked you, so that he needs more clarification between social and public theme.
Word romantic has been used by many to refer to the adventures of a youth in terms of love for people, etc. But
No, sir, Sir, like he means he wants more clarification between social and a public team.
Yes, exactly. You want the public team? Yeah, public
No,
team.
no, sir. He wants more clarification between public and social team.
Public and social.
Social team, sir.
Social. Social, I said it may overlap. I tell you, any public team can be social team. A social team which refers to a particular society need not be public. Any public team will be a social team, no doubt about it. It
Yeah.
applies to the whole universe. But if you are going to write something, some theme about your own society, your special society, your specific society, that is also social theme. I may find some parallels in my society. I may find, but I may not also find. For example, certain things, certain happenings, or certain ways of living, let's say, certain styles of living, I may not find in my society, or some rituals I may not find in my societies. You are going to condemn a ritual. Example, okay? You are going to write something about a ritual in your society, not religious, in your own African society or in my own Indian society. That ritual may not be available, may not be existing in your society. Whereas a public theme, more or less, a public theme, public, all societies across. If not there, I can at least draw parallels. A social theme is more specific, whereas a public theme can be general. I think I have made myself clear. A public theme can also be social, and social theme need not be public. You get my point? A can be only in A. B can include A. Social, if I call social themes as A can be. If I say B as a public theme, it may have a social theme which is appealing to, or which appeals to, which has relevance to the entire society across society. A public theme can also be a social theme, but a social theme need not be a public theme. Need not be. If a social theme is going to be a public theme, then well and good. Have I clarified?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You get my point?
If yes, if I understand, you mean that
What is
social?
what is available in your environment?
Yes, sir.
You are
I
writing
say
something about what is available in your environment.
socialism is related to the.
I can give some examples, but it may be little not acceptable. For example, racial issue or subordination. You get my point? A parallel of that can be found in England, in other places like what you call religious distinction, etc., etc. Certain things I cannot give examples because we are going public now. So that's why I say you read some poems by not good, some poems by African writers. You will definitely know how many of those themes have public relevance and how many of those themes are relevant to only the African context or African environment or African society. When I write a novel or when I write a poem, I always have the Indian environment. Only example I'm saying. It may not be appealing to you. But when I write about marginalization or discrimination, yes, I can write. Discrimination of many kinds, all over the world. It is not specific only to India. It is not specific only to Africa or Australia or England or any other developing nation or Turkmenistan or Kyrgyzstan, anything like that. It may be have an universal appeal. That's what I mean by public theme. Have I made myself clear?
Understood.
Yeah. Still, if there's any doubt, we will clarify it further. I'll clarify it further tomorrow by giving 2 poems. It's there in your book. I don't have time to read those. I'll give it one. And romantic themes, it's not realistic. For example, the poems written by romantic poets like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, that's simply write about beauty, truth, and truth, beauty. Look at the irony there, paradox there. Not paradox. Look at beauty, truth. Look at the structure. I'm extremely sorry. I stand corrected. Or in the same poem, heard melodies are sweet, but unheard are sweeter. How can you talk about unheard? It's exaggeration. Does it have an open? Well, if you read the whole poem, only will be able. Ode on a Grecian urn. And romantic poets are going on writing something about the bird, something about this one, that one, that one. Right? So it need not be realistic. And lack of restraint. Romantic themes, which are there in poems written by romantic poets, or otherwise like trying to say something about landscape, trying to say something about mountains, trying to say something about all exaggeration. That's not very realistic. All blown up. Okay. Then that's what I said. There's always a sense of wonder in romantic poetry. Mystery, subjectivity, highly emotional, spontaneity, excessive emotion, excessive softness, and ornamented diction. Diction means vocabulary or language. Attributes of those poems which have romantic themes, those poems will always include a sense of wonder, something mysterious, highly subjective. And emotion overtakes. Emotion and feelings overtake the fact. Emotions and feelings overtake the fact. For example, the word in a poem, Solitary Reaper. It goes like that. As I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more. Right? In Shakespearean plays, you can see. And all these are conveyed through soft words, ornamented. Diction means ornamented, means very polished words. I fall upon the thorns of life. Many words are there, many lines are there from romantic poets. Right? And romantic themes will include portrayal of nature, love, and childhood, which has experiences in the past and memories. Past memories. Quite a lot. Your past memory, more or less, it's highly personal. Highly personal. That's why I told you, daffodils were not appealing to the the one who accompanied. Just like everything. Whereas the poet Wordsworth, it had a lot of appealing, a lot of emotions, a lot of things. Very important. And those emotions are conveyed through what we call ornamented diction. I wandered lonely as a cloud. First line. I wandered lonely as a cloud. Right? What a great imagination. Fine. Can go for some. So, romantic themes or romantic poetry will include these elements: sense of wonder, mystery, subjectivity, predominance. Emotions will predominate actual theme, okay, actual content, spontaneity. It will be very spontaneous. See, for example, when I don't know whether I can use examples because certain examples I can't give on screen or online. You can always. Themes will include portrayal of nature, love. Romantic themes will include nature, love, and childhood business experiences. Tomorrow also we'll continue. Don't worry. Okay. And nature poetry. That is, a nature poem relates to human emotions. That is just observation and then writing something in praise of that. Something you observe about the hanging gardens of Babylon, if you write. If you look at the Alps, mountains, or if you look at the Himalayas, or if you look at the swarming of bees, BES, in the garden of bees, you'll be able to write relates to human emotions. And nature poetry or romantic poetry uses language that is simple in diction and uses other devices like simile, I don't know it, okay, metaphor taken from the world of nature, about mountains, about animals, about birds, about instruments also. Okay. And then the last one is structure in poetry. With that, I think we'll have to. Every poem will have a beginning, like in any other process, and the beginning will strike the theme, every beginning. Maybe the first line, behold the signal in this field on solitary island last, reaping, stop here or did she pause? Alone she cuts and binds a grain and sings a melancholy strain. First stanza. Then what was she singing? A solitary reaper. Okay, it is the subject is a solitary reaper. What was she doing? She was doing something. She was singing. How was the singing? Now Nightingale did more chant, the lines go like that. Then the development of themes, development of the personality of the solitary reaper and her activity and her hobby, maybe her singing, development of the personality there. And then the development of the person, development of the theme. The theme here is highly about the subject, about a solitary reaper, a social worker, not ordinary social worker, ordinary human being. But a poet is able to write a poem on an ordinary solitary reaper. We can find in our tribal villages many solitary bullock cart drivers or somebody. But we are not writing, only a verse was able to write. Okay. Then climax or ending. There are 4 stanzas. Even in a sonnet, a 14-line poems, there will be beginning, there will be development of theme, there will be climax, and there will be an ending. Any poetry, any poem. Each stage may have a different focus, and the language choice and structuring of lines may be differing accordingly. The use of different patterns, images, and rhetorical devices may depend on the focus or the emphasis that poet wants to have. There's a full stop there. The tone will also, I repeat it, the use of different patterns, images, and rhetorical devices may depend on the focus or the emphasis that the poet wants to have. Full stop. Okay. The tone will also depend on the focus and theme. Besides, the poet's attitude, emotions and feelings, and the context. So the structure of a poem, the physical structure, the arrangement of the lines in the poem. Every poem will have a beginning, somewhere in the middle, the themes the theme which has been struck in the first opening line or in the third line, or the topic which has been opened, or the topic which has been conveyed in the first few lines will be developed over the other few lines in that poem. And then every poem will have an ending. The ending may be a question. The ending may be an expression of surprise. The ending may be an expression of sorrow, depending on the theme. The ending may be. The ending may be. I tell you, may be related to the beginning. The impact of the beginning will be there in the ending. The impact of the concept will be there in the ending. If the concept or if the idea that is given in the first few lines has some kind of questions to pose, the author will be expressing his inability to. So there may not be a conclusion. The author also, the poet also may be posing a question in any form. That's all for the day. Okay, so we have tried to define what is poetry. We have tried to define what are all the possible themes of a poem and what can be the structure of a poem, and etc. etc. What are the different types of kinds of poems, etc. etc. And we have also towards the end now we are discussing something about the structure of poetry, right? And poetry uses words and phrases and expressions which are poetic in form, F-O-R-M. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. On the other side of the
Thank you, sir, for the lecture.
I'm sure you have understood at least something of what all I have said. If not,
Yes, sir.
you can
Very
always
much.
give your feedback to the center, and any question you can type. Tomorrow we'll begin with the discussion of those questions. Gentlemen, don't simply go with what all I have said as if it is right. You may have your doubts. Please raise your doubts in the form of questions. We'll be able to. It was nice for me also to interact with you non-stop.